drug, No, I went back to the drawing board, and thank heaven, the pharmacologists who really geeked out on this paper they wrote went through every binding affinity of every thiol known to humanity and every form of bismuth known to humanity. And I just kept going down the list until I found something that they still made that we could buy. And so literally this, and this is a super reactive substance such that when the pharmacy buys it, it has like a warning on it that says this shit is reactive. Well, that's what you want. You want a bismuth that binds up with the thiol. That's why you use that one, right? So that was available. I knew I could get DMPS, and DMSA will work. There's a substitute ratio there. And ALA I knew I could get. So bam. Did that. So then we start using this. Now this is made by a compounding pharmacy, needs a prescription, etc. And my friend who used to work for the NIH gets on this because then a year later we're speaking again, and I unveil this free recipe, which now is worth a lot of money apparently. He's looking at it. He comes up to me, he's like, "Does that work as good as it sounds like it works?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You should try it." He goes, "Oh no, I'm going to." He got his pharmacy to make it. So he started using it, and he gets it like the worst of everyone. And he started to have some good results, and I got in with some other folks, and we all were all trying it. What we found was that this really, like this would break through when nothing else is breaking through, especially like with the severe PAN and this severe Lyme complex, all that. So that takes time. But we prove concept, and also the other proof of concept is no pharmaceutical company is spending as much money as they are on those sequestered drugs to make a patentable drug that's not going to work. And so that'll be available too. I bet it won't be as cheap. Now, the next step was once we kind of proved that, some of you have seen this thing called Facebook, right? So somehow in my career, I've been added to every doctor secret Facebook group in the universe, apparently. I've been made administrators. I've never once asked to be administrator of anything, and I'm an admin to things that don't even, I mean, now I have to see it all the time. Well, so I started talking about this and trying to educate people through Facebook, because that's what we do now, right? And then I get people calling saying, well, I can't order from a compounding pharmacy. I'm in, someplace where I can't do that. Or, God forbid, Canada, something like that. And so I sent all the Canadian pharmacies the pharmaceutical version and said, it's all for you, make it at your own will. Well, not all provinces and not all states can get from a pharmacy. So we went one more rung down, so we kept the bismuth subnitrite, but we had to not use DMPS or DMSA because those are prescription-only items. So we used the monothiol ALA, and then I subbed in black cumin. And that's because black cumin's in that middle area too. And so that became the OTC stuff. And there's probably a table with like a flyer on this somewhere near here. And it's available over the counter. This has actually worked almost as good. Now, you can see that with a little bit less, just one line less binding affinity, it's probably not quite as stable, although the subnitrate form of bismuth binds pretty hard to the ALA actually. Not as good as DMPS. But the black cumin being in there, black cumin is so strong. One I haven't mentioned is also castor oil. One of the reasons castor oil causes as much GI upset as it does is it's kind of like black cumin in that it busts into biofilms, but it also has a toxicity to it. So we use black cumin instead of castor, which is good. So I should disclose that I was paid a formulation fee to make this. That was to keep my wife from divorcing me. But I promise you that doesn't really even pay for my bar bill. So it's not like, I'm not killing it on this. But my wife didn't leave me this time, so that was good. She's never actually left me. We've been married 35 years, and she's put up with the most amazing amount of shit that I've been doing. Because she believes that someday I'm going to come on to something. It's probably going to be really good. All right, so Biosolve is a prescription form, and usually what I do with people is a capsule, just one, away from food, because it's reactive, you don't want it binding with your food and stuff like that. Big glass of water 3 times a week is a test dose, and then body weight, kind of 1 to 4 caps, usually once a day, maybe twice a day, usually once a day though, 3 to 5 days a week. So there's sort of a cyclic activity, partly just to give the body a break throughout. This is the same way that I dose the OTC version. It's just I might, instead of 1 to 2 caps for treatment, I might give 2 or 3 caps with the OTC version, but it's the same protocol. Now, if they start like hurting or having other reactions or dermatologic stuff in the first few weeks, I may stop giving them a break and just dose it every day. Because if you open the biofilms and you're kind of on that train, the first week or 2, a lot of immune response. So that's when you're bringing in the natural anti-infectives and immune support and stuff. And that can be helpful, but usually we cycle it. Now normally, remember the idea with that spectrum is that the bad phase 2 ones we want to open, let the immune system in. We want to keep some pressure on killing stuff, usually with herbal things, and then supporting the immune system underneath. And then there's going to be a little bit of endocrine support for reasons I'll say in a moment. But then once we get past that, now normally 2, 3, 4 months in the worst cases. I've had a few of the Pandas kids that were really, really bad where it was more like 9 or 10 months, but normally like 3 to 6 months is sort of the median there. They may have no change in the first couple of months, but when they do, they will exhibit signs of immune reaction. Any cytokine reaction they can have will happen. And it's normally whatever their weak point is. So in Pandas, it's in the brain. Or for other people, it's the joints. Other people, it's myalgias. Other people, it's gut stuff only. Some people, unlucky, it's all of it. And then this is when you have to really get in there and say, okay, we've opened it, Pandora's box is open, we need to move this stuff out. So what we do is we balance the immune reaction with the anti-infective therapies. And again, those, I really do prefer the broad spectrum herbal antimicrobials like Mexican oregano and olive leaf, et cetera, and I'll throw some berberine or whatever else I think. Certain times drugs are required, certain times they're not. And what you're trying to do here in the balance is support them without suppressing their immune system. Because if you come in, and I have with one suicidal child, had to give them steroids to just stop the suicidality and then kind of come back around and started a little slower. But that's only been once. That's okay, because you had to do it. But normally what it works out to is there's the infective part, and then there's adrenal and thyroid support. Because if you take somebody who can't mount immune response because they can't see the immune problem, and then suddenly they're exposed to all this immune activity and they get these big cytokine dumps, their adrenals go crazy trying to keep up with it. That's what your adrenals do, right? When you get a natural infection, your adrenals overproduce cortisol to help kind of mitigate the immune response. Well, if they're sick that long, their natural adrenal response is gone, which is why they get really painful or mental stuff or whatever. So adrenal support with the anti-infectives is important. So usually anti-infective and adrenal support, if they're on thyroid, they might actually need a little more thyroid for weeks, not like forever. But while the adrenal support is kicked up, they might need a little more thyroid just to kind of keep them level because those two work together. Here's what people are freaked out by. If they're on a supplement, okay, like, can't think right now, so I'll make up something. Let's say you have a supplement called Adrenal, right? Or Adrenal Mix Max or something like that. And you're pretty steady taking 1 or 2 in the morning. You open up all this biofilm stuff, they literally might need 5 of them or 10 of them to keep them level for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then they go back down. It's that big of a jump in adrenal stress. If they have a sensitive thyroid while you're doing all that extra adrenal stuff, they need extra thyroid. It may just be little adjustments. So you got to talk about this with the patient first, because this is like, wow. It's really like, wow, what happens. Occasionally we have people who are on low-dose hydrocortisone because their adrenals are making so little cortisol. So they're on 5 or 10 or 20 milligrams of hydrocortisone. So it's non-suppressive doses, but what will happen is that they hit this and they need 10 milligrams of hydrocortisone to keep level without it. Their immune system goes crazy. For 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, they might need like 20 or 30 milligrams of hydrocortisone, which is still not really suppressive. Contrary to what probably all your teachers tell you. It's actually not suppressive, and it gets them through with still having an immune response. So this is a real thing, and whether it's that they're hurting, whether it's they're not sleeping anymore, whether it's their OCD kicks up, or they have anxiety or suicidality, or whether it's their GI reaction is just so wicked. During those first few weeks when you break through, you've got to do all of this, or they're really uncomfortable. They're not your friend anymore. All right. Once you break through, once it progresses, so you might be doing this dance of 3 or 4 days a week with a bis-thiol combo, a lot of natural anti-infectives, and whatever other anti-infectives work for you. And then adrenal support, which usually adrenal thyroid supports a lot, and then you taper it back down. Somewhere in the months, usually median of 3 to 6 months, I put 12 in because bad ones maybe. Then what you want to do is realize that it gets kind of like there's no more big cytokine reactions, all that stuff. And then you know that you've moved them back over here. And then you can do things that are more phase 1 oriented, like tannins and phenolics and a lot of the other herbs. Now, what you'll notice is the things like oregano and olive leaf and all that are also those things. So they're kind of nice dual there. And then your goal is to get things settled down and the immune system working on its own, so that then they just go and they don't need any of this stuff because you finally eradicated it. Now, the more stuff that lives in the big biofilms, the longer it takes. And what's weird is, usually it's patients who they've been sick for 20, 30 years. They're very chronically ill, your chronic Lyme and your other fibro people and all that. They're normally these people. In pandas, little children, these biofilms build super quick, the bad ones. So if you have a PANS case that's not going anywhere, they're not getting anywhere with treatment, this is a piece of the resistance, okay? Because at that point, it's more about the autoimmune response in the brain than anything else, and that is often triggered by the fact that you can't get to the infection. So PANS is the one exception where children build these things quickly. Normally, kids don't do it. At least children, as we know them now, as the biome weakens, they'll be there too. Now you can go and get a nice version of this with references at NDNR. You all know what that is, right? Naturopathic Doctor News and Review. Okay, yeah. And it's in their GI thing for 2018, Biofilms, what we learned. It's got it has the references that I was telling you about, that you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel, you can find all this stuff. So you can get that there. There's, of course, that book coming. And I think yes. I assume there may be a question.
So when I think Lyme, and I did my undergrad thesis on Lyme and biofilms, so this is like my area of interest. When I think Lyme, I think about traveling along nerves and blood vessels. But you were talking mostly about GI stuff, so I'm wondering if you might, obviously not with bismuth, but with other therapies, think more towards the IV line of things with Lyme.
Yeah, in the In the more complex cases, it's rarely one or the other. What I will say is, if you're trying to do it all with IV, it never works. And here's the reason that I believe that is true. And I didn't used to believe this because I never had this much experimentation. In your chronic Lyme patients, it's almost never actually the Lyme itself that is the reason that they're so sick. It is the 11 million other things that go with Lyme, most of which we can't test, and most of which live in the gut in biofilms, that literally suck the life out of the immune system. So then the Lyme is like, my friends are running interference for me, I'm going to go everywhere. See the same thing with mycoplasma, C. pneumo, all the ones that like to travel in different places like the nervous system, etc. So what I see with Lyme patients is a little bit different because it tends to be a bit more complex. But the way I've sort of settled on it, just watching their responses, is I have to do the oral part because the all of the helper infections that are waylaying my immune system are probably more here. And then I also have to do the respiratory and the neurological and the deeper tissues. And so what we tend to do with those folks is kind of cycle back and forth between systemic and then oral. And there's a lot of people with Lyme complex where they have multiple co-infections, all that other stuff, where if you get to them in a proximal enough time, they don't have time to build these real bad biofilms, and you might get to them with 1 or 2 or 3 therapies. Right. It's more the people who are, like, they've been on antibiotics for 3 years, and it's like nothing's happening, they've rotated. Those people, generally, there's, all the compartments are affected, but by different stuff. And so I look at the oral therapy as taking away their helpers more than the Lyme itself, and then the systemic things is getting more to the guys that travel in those compartments, yeah. So it's more of a, you think of it as a family that you just don't want to visit your body, and it did, and they're everywhere now, and yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah. And that's kind of true with all these things. Like the sicker somebody gets, it's like anything else. Once there's a chink in the armor, the weaker ones jump on too, and then they occupy your immune system, and then the stronger ones just get stronger.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes?
How are you dosing the compounded formula? How many capsules per day?
Well, and the slide is still pretty accurate, but I'm pretty conservative because even at 1 a day, like 3 or 4 days a week as the normal treatment, I know it says 1 to 4, because I used to think, well, I would probably need 4 and little people need 1 or whatever. Really, once it starts to work, 1 is plenty, like 1 or 2. So most of the time I'll do that. Now, if I get somebody, and this again is more of a clinical determination, like we're 3 weeks in, it's kind of like maybe reacting, maybe not. They're either been sick a long time or they're a bit bigger person and they're only on 1. I might say, well, let's do a week and try 2 or 3 and just see if that shifts it for you. And sometimes that does. So there is a dose-dependent response. But once Pandora's box opens, and then you really want to support the endocrine part, you want to get real anti-infective so you don't have as much to react to. And then you just kind of keep the pressure on there until it seems like everything's getting less reactive, and then you're kind of visualize it going back to kind of the preventive phase 1. Yeah. Another thing I'll just say, another time that we've used this, and I'll slide on it, but so far, it's never failed. You ever get those people that have all types of digestive symptoms, and you do a good stool analysis? I don't mean the shitty kind that the normal labs do, but like you get something that's got some PCR and some good micro and some culture and a little of everything, because you can never catch it all with one thing. And they literally have nothing pathogenic. in every case so far, and I don't mean just healthy people, but people with a lot of GI stuff, and they've got these really beautiful stool results, I will now put them on something. A lot of times I'll do one or the other of these now that I kind of feel comfortable with them. And I'll put them on that for even 2 weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks, depending on how long they've been sick. And I've never had a person, and you do follow-up stool tests where stuff, there wasn't at least 1 or 2 really nasty organisms that were coming out. And it's because in the gut, they really they burrow in and they're in the biofilm. And so, you know, they might not even shed DNA, interestingly, or they're so busy sharing it with their friends. It doesn't come out. So when you get, because it doesn't, and for years it didn't make sense. Like, how could you have all these GI things and have absolutely sterile, stool results that don't show anything? Well, it's one reason. It's not the only reason, but it's worth a try. So now, when I get that person, 2 things. One is if they come and they say, no, I've already had a good stool test and there was nothing there, but man, all my gravity of symptoms is here. I'll be like, well, let's try this. Do this for 2 or 3 weeks, do another stool sample, and let's see what happens. Or they just come in and you're assessing them for the first time, and through their history and everything, you realize it's here. As opposed to wasting your money on one test to find out there was nothing that came out, I'll usually pre-treat them. Now, I will say, I have even done that with sort of the middle level things like NAC. You give them 1 or 2 grams of NAC a day for 2 or 3 weeks, and sometimes that's enough to kind of open things up so their stool tests are positive. Now that there's the OTC version, I tend to use that for prepping for stool test. But I found it just reveals more trouble, and then you kind of have a target. Like, there are people where when we do this, then all of a sudden, there are pathogenic parasites that come out, and they weren't coming out before. The other time that you want to think about this, and you'll see this with people, is you get, and I have opinions about this that I will not share because it will take longer than you want, but you get what the gastroenterologists call a indeterminate pathogen, like Blastocyst hominis. Now, that's not a good bug for you, okay? But in America, we don't like to treat it because we like Blastocyst for some reason. I don't know why. Blastocyst that doesn't go away with repeated treatments is usually, it's not because, it's in the biofilm, but it's outside. It's its friends that live in the biofilm that are allowing it to stay there forever. I've seen people go through repeated rounds of Alinea and metronidazole and all the heavy hitters, and the blasto never leaves. That's somebody that you want to do some kind of biofilm stuff and then retest them. You'll find that there's usually other family members that are there that need more attention.
Are you finding other microbes, once the healing crisis begins, and finding sort of a pattern in the diseases or disorders that people come to you with, like Lyme versus someone who has this weird GI stuff versus someone who has neurological things?
Yeah, so as far as patterns go, yes. There you go, that's a great answer. It really depends on, this is a time then we're going back in time through their history is helpful if they're a good historian. Because a lot of times you'll find out, the Lyme, once they found that, I'd already been sick with gut stuff for 5 years, right? Never had gut stuff, but I had these chronic respiratory or sinus things, or they discovered fungus in my sinus and could never figure that out, whatever. There's usually some predicate. And that's in the more complicated people. And they literally just keep adding stuff. Nothing ever gets subtracted. So that's where you've got stuff in all the mucous membranes diverting immune activity and stuff. So the more complex, longer term the illness is, yeah, we see these more complex patterns, and they unwind kind of in the same way. So you may have to switch up what you're doing. Like, we've had people, so kind of to that point, I guess, because it's the example I use. We've had some of our PANDAS kids, their doctor goes somewhere, they read online, the parents read online, well, let's try bag spray, which is a biofilm breaker for the nose, or let's try xylitol spray, or 23 part per million silver. And they're like, we will never do that again because our kid was sick for a week after. That's like golden information. I don't want to make them do it again, but what happened is they just poked the dragon and they could get to it here. And so what you want to explain to them is, well, what that means is probably if it's here, bit in your lungs, a lot in your gut. So what we want to do is support you, then start to chip away at it. And that's actually a big tell, and it means that it's probably been there a while. Simpler things where they don't have chronic fatigue, they don't have systemic things, they rarely get joint pain, but they've got a lot of gut stuff. Those are often a little more linear. They might take months to do, but it really is all about the gut, and it may be a little turbulent there, but it's more about just supporting that. Those are the simpler ones. The people with Lyme and the people with the other stuff, they go through iterations, and they literally, like a layer comes off, and then you're dealing with the next guys. Yeah.
It's clear GI system made a positive test, like like lactose positive or something. Would you still go to your protocol, or would you do typical macroscopic eradication process?
Yeah, I think it's a super important question, and it points something out that I probably didn't say. I tend to think of this only when other things are really not working, where there's paradoxical things going on, like either your labs look way too good for as sick as you are, or you've had all the best treatments, but you keep kind of cycling back to the same illness. That's when I think of doing this. If somebody in here, so I do a version of this talk in the SIBO community, and where it's a little bit more specific. But the upshot of that is I don't recommend people do this until they've gone through their A and B and maybe C SIBO game. You know, everyone has at least 2, if not 3 protocols that almost always work. If you get to the second or third and it's still not working, that's when you want to try this. Yeah, and it's kind of the same. If someone comes in with, you know, C pneumo and some EBV and some other stuff, and in 6 months they're kind of turned the corner and they're better, this is probably not a player. It's when it's not going away, or we get one dead on their labs, and then 2 more come back up. That's when I think of this. This is really a higher, kind of a higher entry order thing. Just those of you that like SIBO, I don't not like it. I'm just saying, that there's a thing. And if you don't like reading, also. So there's the article I wrote there. There's a big, famous doctor in the SIBO community, Michael Ruscio, R-U-S-C-I-O. And he and I spoke together at a conference, and I either irritated him enough or impressed him enough that eventually he had me on his radio show, his podcast. And he does a podcast about health and SIBO, basically, whatever. He's super into the SIBO world. And he was one of the most informed, best interviewers I've ever had around this, because he understood all of the other pieces. And so if you want to listen to that, it's just Dr. Ruscio, R-U-S-C-I-O radio. I get nothing for pimping him, by the way. And he is a good-looking man, too, so it'd be easy to pimp. But, true, that part's true. But if you go there and you look my name up, I have 2 interviews. One's about cancer, so that we won't be talking about biofilms so much there. The other one is about SIBO and biofilms. And he gets some really good stuff. So, like, again, if you don't like reading, you want to read that article, or you want to hear about SIBO, that's the one I would go to. It's really interesting. And it's not because of what I said so much, but it's what he brought out of our experience. You and then whoever. Yeah.
My question is, what is your concern on triggering autoimmunity with the protocol, since such a strong immune reactions? And then the second one is, are you educating patients on the fact that they may be immunocompromised during treatment and to avoid co-infections?
Yeah. So you will trigger more autoimmunity not doing it. You leave bugs in the biofilm, and this is literally at least a half-day lecture, but you leave them there, and they, through the back door, will trigger autoimmune reactions like you've never seen. And those things can trigger cancer biology. So you really don't trigger autoimmunity, you're just exposing it. And they're also not immune compromised, actually, if you do it right, which is why you use the broad spectrum, natural things, etc. They're the opposite of immune compromised. They're immune activated, which is where their symptoms come from.
Wouldn't it be so hyper-focused though on the biofilm bugs that it wouldn't be able to ward off them? Just worrying about like regulating fluids or different infections.
Yeah, well, and that's why you have to watch how much cytokine dump they get. But no, the reason that you always, once they start to have the healing reaction or the immune reaction, the reason that you put in the natural anti-infectives is to cover that eventuality. Yeah, that's why you have to do that. Yeah, if you just leave it, like you just go open up biofilms and there's a lot of stuff in there, they'll become so hyperimmune active that they will just be very sick. And their immune system, if they're super strong, they might get through it, but their immune system will not be able to keep up. It's also why the adrenal and maybe thyroid part is so important, because that just gets blown out of the water for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah.
So if you have a patient that you're not concerned that they have a biofilm, but you know they're about to go into the hospital for surgery,
Yeah.
do you do like prophylactic phase 1 treatment, or when they come out, do you do something so that this doesn't set in and grow?
Yeah, so let's take the easiest one. If they're totally healthy, but they have to go in for some kind of surgery, and we know that, you know, hospital is the best place to get these things, those healthy people usually can do, you know, kind of those like monothials, like NAC or ALA, etc., and just some other, what I would call just prophylactic immune support, broad spectrum herbs, and that's usually enough, actually. If you think about it, the research NIH and CDC and all they're doing, these are on your average Americans who are already immune suppressed, are doing none of these things, and so just adding a little bit helps. Now, if you're already working with the person and they're in these sicker categories, I might like say, hey, take, you know, the OTC one or the prescription one up till you go in the hospital, and then as soon as we can get you some in the hospital or when you get out, we're going to go back on it. That's usually what I do with them. And really the pharmaceutical version of this literally will be given to you from the moment you enter the hospital for surgery. And then there are topical things and other things that are already patented they do during surgery. You will never be told why you're given it yet, but that's going to happen. And my friend will be fabulous, so that's good. Yeah.
The biofilm busters are to be taken